Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on 740 KVOR, Extra Sports 1300, or the streaming apps of those two fine radio stations, which are free to download and free to use. I greatly appreciate it. There's another way to consume the show on a daily basis that is sweeping the nation, and that is watching the show anywhere you scroll at Extra Sports 1300, at 740 KVOR. If you follow me on social media, which it'd sure be nice of you, you can watch the show there as well, at Ginge Watch on Instagram and Threads, and at Gingerly Tweets on X. All right, it will be a veritable cornucopia of sports topics. You know that. And you know that I would love to get your thoughts. Good conversation really all week. Let's keep pushing through. 719-247-1313 is the number if you'd like to call or text into the show, or if you are watching the show on the aforementioned social media platforms, you could certainly drop a comment there. I want to start with the premise here as we get, we're about month and a half away from the start of the college football season, which means it's time for media days, and the Big 12 just had theirs. And it got me thinking, are we collectively over Coach Prime? And I don't necessarily mean that as, is he going to get fired? Although, for the results on the field, right, coaches have been fired, in kind of this window. So I'm not leaving out that possibility. I'm just talking about the hype. Is the hype around CU and Coach Prime done? Because I think it is. I'm not buying into the hype machine anymore with the Colorado Buffaloes. I don't need to hear about the number, and Deion Sanders did this, the number of guys that were captains on their previous team and the guys they got through the portal and all that. I don't want to hear any of that stuff. We are beyond the talking about it. The results have to show themselves on the field. And the Big 12 voters have said that only one team is going to be worse than CU this year, which isn't a lot of hope for a football team that does have a highly touted young quarterback in Julian Lewis. So I'm listening to Deion Sanders speak at Big 12 media days, and I'm like, you can hear from it, because I think there is a really positive story around Deion Sanders, and that is his health. And Deion Sanders talked about that at Big 12 media days.
My younger self would be proud that I was here last year fighting a battle called cancer, and now I'm here with full strength, full energy. I got that thing back. I got that swagger back. I got that dog back. I got that charisma back.
And that's great. And I mean this in all sincerity. It is great to hear that Deion Sanders, who is a good man, like high character guy, it's great that his health is where it needs to be. That's great. And that can only benefit Colorado to some extent, right? It does make you wonder, and we wondered about this throughout last season, how was Deion Sanders at all distracted? And understandably so, right? I don't want to for a second minimize what he was dealing with. In fact, I'm going the other way, because I'm saying this is a huge thing. I don't know how one can continue their work dealing with some of the things he was dealing with. At least I couldn't. So I give Deion Sanders all the credit in the world for fighting through it all last year, and I am thrilled to hear that his health is much better. But in terms of the swagger and all this other stuff being back, that's great. And that is part of the phenomenon that he has been in Boulder, and that will play well with, the constant effort to raise NIL funds in Boulder and all of that kind of stuff. Like, you're going to need that because he is the ultimate salesman. But I think outside of that, it kind of falls on deaf ears. This is a year that Deion Sanders needs to prove that he can coach at this level. Okay, how many offensive coordinators are we on to now in Boulder? How many different quarterbacks? How many guys have gone in and out via the transfer portal? There has been so much change year over year over year in Boulder. At some point, some guys got to stick. Some coaches have to stick and build some continuity and start to move this, pardon the football pun, but move the ball down the field. Okay, it's great that they have a charismatic leader that can raise money, right, and get people to buy tickets, and that's half the battle. But the other half is the more important half, and the other half is what I'm focused on. And the Colorado Buffaloes got to start winning football games. A lot of this side stuff with Deion Sanders is just it's done. It's not going to fly anymore. And I'll give you an example of this. As much as I have been on board with the Deion Sanders era in Boulder and have noticed, the pros outweighing the cons through most of it. One thing that I have regularly criticized is Deion Sanders almost taking a page out of, the President Trump playbook in terms of being almost attacking media outlets that don't write positive things about his program. And what I'm talking about most specifically is The Athletic. So here's Deion Sanders yesterday. He's asked by somebody who I would describe as a very friendly, pro Deion Sanders media person, asking about blocking out outside noise. This is Deion Sanders talking about that.
We don't care about what people say. People are always going to have opinion. If my kids and my coaches and our staff don't understand who they are, we have a problem. They're not.
Okay, great messaging, blocking out the outside noise. The very next question comes from someone from The Athletic about Deion Sanders opting not to be in the new college football game. And here's his answer. The reasons why he's not in the college football game are, I don't really care. It's the end of this that matters to me.
It probably didn't fit where we're going right now. That's probably it. It was probably that simplistic. Thank you, Athletic. You guys do a wonderful job. You know I'm lying, right? Next.
It never worked for Deion Sanders to be this way. And you know that this is not the first time that he's done this. Remember that there was a writer who was banned from could not ask any more questions of Deion Sanders. The controlling the media and making sure it's only puff pieces and positive coverage that is coming out of his program as much as he can. You're never going to stop it, right? Because, there are people who don't attend the weekly press conferences that have platforms. Like me, I don't make it up to Boulder every week, so I can say anything positive or negative about the program. But the idea of trying to control the messaging coming out of that room and Deion Sanders not wanting to answer questions from media outlets who have been fair, I think, in their criticism of him, or doing what he did with The Athletic and maybe answering the question and then throwing a little tag on the end, basically trashing The Athletic, which is one of the more well-respected media outlets in the sports world. Like, that stuff can't continue. And I looked at it because I'm like, has The Athletic really just piled on Deion Sanders over the years? I could find just as many positive Athletic articles about Deion Sanders and Boulder than I can negative ones. But apparently somewhere along the way, there was one or two that really got under his skin, and he's just never let go of it. That stuff has to stop. Because no one, I shouldn't say no one, the vast majority of people are down on Colorado football. They've either completely, to my earlier question, are they over it? I think some people don't even care what's going on in Boulder anymore. But I think there are people that maybe care that are down on it and saying, how many years do Buffs fans have to wait for something positive to come out in terms of the results? That's only going to fuel the fire. Taking little digs like that at media outlets, especially one as powerful as The Athletic. I'm not saying you suck up to them, but was it really necessary to throw in that little line? And this is something that Deion Sanders has done throughout his tenure in Boulder. I think that there are good things that Deion Sanders is doing to make Colorado football relevant, to generate interest in terms of sponsorships and NIL, and I think he still attracts good athletes in the transfer portal. I think he has positives when it comes to recruiting. He has positives when it comes to season ticket sales, but I think his reach is shrinking. Right? I think the further you go away from from Boulder, the less people care about Colorado football. And when it started, it was everybody cared about it across the state and across the country. And that's gone down year after year after year. So like I said, my point here is I think the bravado, all of that kind of stuff coming from Deion Sanders, that salesman part of it, I think it's falling on deaf ears when it comes to people who follow the program. And I think we're reaching a point here that now that he is healthy, right, that there's got to be production on the field. I don't know, with all the good that Deion Sanders does in terms of affecting the bottom line of Colorado athletics, if he is on the hot seat. But if not for that stuff, his seat would be flaming hot. Right? This would be the year that if the Buffs don't win games, Deion Sanders would be fired. The only thing that is saving him, perhaps, is how he's affecting the business of Colorado football and the business of Colorado athletics. But even that has a shelf life. Right? At some point you say, we thank you for the boost that you gave us. Hopefully the people in Boulder are able to use it to catapult Colorado athletics forward. And there's a point where they say it's not worth it anymore. We got to get somebody who can coach at this level. We have this momentum that you have created, and we thank you for it. But we got to get somebody in here that's going to win some football games, or else people are going to start to tune out. And I think this is the year for that. There have got to be some positive signs that Deion Sanders knows what it takes and can implement those ideas that translate into winning football games. Because if they finish where they're projected to, I think there are going to be a lot more people that are completely out on this program, locally and nationally. And I'll just say this as I start to kind of look ahead to the upcoming football seasons. I'll tell you right now, in terms of vibes, in terms of interest level, maybe hope, if you want to throw that in there, about what this season could be, CU's third. I'm more bullish on what Air Force could be this year or what CSU could be under Jim Mora than I am what Deion Sanders is going to deliver in Boulder. And that's kind of crazy to say, given that they have Julian Lewis. They have a highly touted young quarterback that should be ready to step in there and be a difference maker. But there's some audio from Julian Lewis that has some Buffs fans going, I don't know if this is the guy.
I'm actually looking at the defenses now. Last year we wasn't really looking at defense as much, just kind of high school free ball and just out there playing football. But, it's a lot bigger than that now, so it should be fun.
And I think people have taken this out of context or misunderstood what Julian Lewis is saying. I don't think this is Julian Lewis talking about the entirety of the CU program. I mean, they look like a rudderless ship. They look like they had no ideas on offense. It did look that way. But I don't think Julian Lewis is saying we, as the Buffs, we're just playing schoolyard ball. I think he's talking about his own experience being so young. But that still leaves room for a bit of criticism. This guy's the golden goose. This guy's your future. How are you not investing in him and trying to coach him up? So maybe therein lies the failure of the Buffs coaching staff to have Julian Lewis more ready for this year than he currently is. But the idea that he's not really thinking the game is not foreign to freshmen. So I didn't take this as the entire Buffs offense was just playing schoolyard ball. I take this as a freshman was coming in and was drowning a little bit and not really learning too much. Maybe the Buffs have some, responsibility in that. Maybe it's just normal freshman stuff. I suppose we'll see. Julian Lewis feels more confident in his ability this year than he did last. So let's see the results. Take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. You buying any of the hype in Boulder? Is there any hype? Maybe that's the better question. I know Deion Sanders was using Big 12 media days to try to hype up his program. Do you feel any of that? I don't know that I do. I think most people are just sitting here and saying, just go win football games. Just do that. 719-247-1313. Back after this. Braun Watch continues, and I regret to inform you that people in the know are believing that we will not have a resolution to Braun Watch this week. I think if you notice, NBA Summer League is starting up this week. The World Cup is going on. I think that it makes sense that LeBron's not going to maybe make his announcement when there are other things going on in the NBA world and other things going on in the sports world. And I mean the sports big wide world that he has to kind of compete with, I guess. So it makes sense to me that it probably wait till later, or at least till the herd is thinned out a little bit more in the World Cup. Doesn't surprise me that, that we're sitting here on Wednesday and probably not until next week. But something interesting happened. All the interesting stuff with LeBron is coming through his agent, Rich Paul, on his podcast. Bob Myers, who you remember from the Golden State Warriors, is no longer with the Warriors, went to TV, and now he is he is an advisor to Josh Harris, who is the owner of the Sixers and the New Jersey Devils and Crystal Palace in the Premier League and the Washington Commanders. Bob Myers helps kind of advise on all of them. If there's a Colorado equivalent to Bob Myers, it would be Kevin Demoff more than it would be Josh Kroenke. Okay, and I think that's why Bob Myers felt it was okay for him to go on Rich Paul and Max Kellerman's podcast to talk about recruiting LeBron, because I don't know that it would be, if it was Josh Harris himself, I don't know, with tampering, or if that would be a faux pas within, NBA circles for an actual sitting owner to go onto a podcast and openly campaign for an agent's client to join his team. But Bob Myers is not the GM of the Sixers. He's not the president of the Sixers. His ranking is above all of that. It's over the entire Josh Harris sports empire. So perhaps that's why it would be good. So if you're listening to this and go, well, Josh Kroenke needs to go on, it would be Kevin Demoff. That would be the equivalent. So if you want, after you listen to this, if you want Kevin Demoff to go on to Rich Paul's podcast to make a pitch for LeBron James, that would be the way to do it. But here is Bob Myers basically making a pitch to LeBron James on the Game Over podcast with Rich Paul and Max Kellerman. And he continued to make his pitch there, but you get the idea of, podcasts or not. They kind of go on for a little bit. But I do find it fascinating that somebody associated with one of the teams in pursuit of LeBron James would go on a podcast. I find that fascinating. Just like I found the whiteboard on their last episode, or one of their last episodes. I don't listen to the podcast. I found that fascinating. So I find this fascinating. And the thing about it is Bob Myers isn't wrong. If this is just about winning, this is just about going to try what gives him the best chance to win a title this upcoming season. Because I don't know if he's got a 2 or 3 year plan, or it's just a one. I got to imagine he's kind of on a year-to-year thing. It's Philadelphia. It absolutely is. He would shoulder less of the burden in Philadelphia as he would some other potential destinations. And that team already, with the addition of Jaylen Brown, I think has earned the right to be labeled as the biggest threat to unseating New York in the East. And I'm not entirely sure that I wouldn't take Philadelphia today to beat the Knicks in a 7-game series. I know how last year's series went, but they added Jaylen Brown. VJ had to come as a year older. I like this Philadelphia team a lot, and certainly no other team can make a better argument for giving LeBron a chance to win another title than Philadelphia. But I do push back against some of the other, because I can talk about Philadelphia, but then people go beyond it. And that's where I push back. Don't tell me that LeBron James would have a better chance to win a title in Miami this year than Denver or Minnesota. Don't tell me that. I don't believe that. Miami is a year away with or without LeBron. Okay, and maybe LeBron wants to be along for the ride. And that's fine. But if we're looking at just the best chance to win right now, don't tell me that going to Miami would give him a better chance than Denver would. I understand that, because the default position is always got to go the East. Like I heard somebody today talking about, yeah, he'd make Denver better, but they're in the West. He'd make Minnesota better, but they're in the West. Yeah, I understand that they're in the West, but adding LeBron James, let's take the Denver Nuggets, being the team that we care more about, I think it gives the Nuggets a legitimate chance to knock off Oklahoma City and San Antonio. Would I take them in a 7-game series? I probably wouldn't right now. I'd have to see how it all comes together, certainly, and what else the Denver Nuggets are going to do. But certainly adding LeBron with Aaron Gordon, Jamal Murray, and Nikola Jokic at the very least gets them a lot closer to those two teams than they are right now. And I can make the same argument for Minnesota. So if it's just about winning above all else, then yeah, Philadelphia has that argument on lock. But I don't think that it's East, and then it's the teams out West. I think LeBron would give the Denver Nuggets exactly what David Adelman is looking for and what John Wallace on draft night reiterated that the Nuggets need, and that's basically another ball handler to go along with Jamal Murray, to move Jamal Murray off the ball. It would be one of the things they absolutely need to get better. But that's kind of the problem here for Denver, is that they're not the best destination, in terms of a clear path to a title, because Philadelphia is in the weaker conference. And they're not him going home, and he has no buddies on the Nuggets like he has Tyrese Maxey on the Philadelphia 76ers. But I have said that if you want to combine, because here's the other thing, if he goes to Philadelphia, is he the number one guy? Maybe he doesn't want to be the number one guy anymore. I understand that. Is he number two? Is he third? I I would think that LeBron wants to win, but also wants to be looked at as not ring chasing. If he joined up with Philadelphia, it would look like he saw the team that was more ready-made to win now, that could win potentially without him, that he could just glom onto and ride to a title. Whereas if he went to Minnesota, if he went to Denver, if he went any other place, for that matter, you could say that LeBron made some semblance of a difference between this team winning a title and not. And so if you balance some of these things out, I think Denver rates very highly, but they can't say that they're absolutely the easiest path to go to the NBA Finals. But I didn't think that LeBron was always looking for the easiest path, although Miami. But Lakers, that wasn't the easiest path, certainly. Cleveland, when he went back, not necessarily the easiest path. So, as I said yesterday, I'm feeling, that less and less likely every day that he's going to choose the Denver Nuggets. But a big picture thing that I want to talk about, too, is the perception of where LeBron goes. Because he learned, I think, in LA that maybe he's not going to necessarily be viewed as the savior anywhere he goes. And there are going to be people that are ready to say that he's ring chasing. But I think if he wants to avoid that conversation altogether, even though I'm saying that LeBron makes a difference with the Nuggets, Nuggets can't win a title without him. With him, they could. Same with Minnesota. Same with Cleveland. Same with, Miami, not this year. I don't think they have any chance, but eventually, he would be a difference maker there. I think people will say that he's ring chasing unless he goes to Cleveland. If he goes anywhere else, he's going to be labeled as a ring chaser. Even if you look, because people are ready to do that. So I have to ask general basketball fans, not necessarily ones that have a vested interest because they're a Wolves or a Nuggets or a Sixers fan. Do you want LeBron to do something different for the end of his career and give us a little bit of a different look? Or are you going to call him a ring chaser for doing that? Because the only place he could go is Cleveland. So either something new and he's ring chasing, or he does something he's already done, which is going to be less important. Right? It's not going to be as big of a deal as when he went back to Cleveland the first time. But then maybe the criticisms of ring chasing don't go. And I don't know, Cleveland did make the Eastern Conference Finals. But to me, I think obviously I have made the case that I think LeBron should join the Denver Nuggets. But if the Nuggets are truly out of it, I'd like to see LeBron, every day that goes by, I'd like to see LeBron do something different. The Cleveland thing, I get it. It would make sense. I want to see something different. So go to Philly, go to Golden State, go to Minnesota. Just something different. Different challenge, different setting. That's kind of where I'm at. Cleveland would make sense. I don't think anyone could begrudge him for going back to Cleveland, but I'm kind of in the mood for something else. And that applies to Miami too. Don't go Miami. I don't want any part. Cleveland would make sense. Miami, no. So that's one destination I want completely off the board. And as a Nuggets supporter, I would not like to see him in Minnesota because that would be a problem for Denver. But if I'm just looking as a basketball fan rather than somebody who wants the Denver Nuggets to win all the time, Minnesota wouldn't be a bad spot for him. So we wait, and we'll see if anybody else tied to. Wouldn't that be something if every episode there's a new person tied to one of the teams in the LeBron sweepstakes that goes out there and tries to make a pitch? It's not going to matter. And Bob Myers actually said this on the podcast. He's like, whatever I say, it's not going to matter to LeBron. LeBron's been in the league long enough. He knows the league well enough. He knows what he's going to do. Or he knows what he's looking for. He's not going to listen to anybody on Rich Paul's podcast and go, you know what? That's a great point. I'm going to go there. And Bob Myers even acknowledged it. Whatever I say is it. So it's purely theater. Or maybe you can win over Rich Paul a little bit more. But ultimately, LeBron, I think, has a good idea what he's looking for, what he values, and maybe he already knows where he's going to go. But from an entertainment standpoint, I hope more teams get a representative of some sort on Rich Paul's podcast and make the pitch to LeBron. 719-24-7-1313. Back after this. The number, if you'd like to call or text in the show, is 719-247-1313. I do like it more if you call up. It's more traditional sports talk radio. And got a call during the break that I think echoes a lot of the same sentiments I have received anytime I've brought up the idea of LeBron James coming to the Denver Nuggets, and that is that you don't want him. You don't want LeBron James in Denver because of, the things that he's done in the past, whether it's the decision, whether it's the nepotism surrounding his son and making the Lakers draft him, or heavily implying, or it was understood, however that all went down, but it was clear nepotism that was going on when it comes to his son, Bronny. Some of the political stances he's taken, flopping, and the caller didn't name all of these things, but I do feel like there's, here locally, there is a lot of pushback on the idea of LeBron James joining the Nuggets. And and maybe some of those things don't bother me as much, and maybe that's why I continue to make the case, but I'm more looking at it from a basketball perspective. And this is the question that I ask to a Nuggets fan who says, we don't want LeBron. Okay, you don't want him for whatever reason. That's fine. How is this team going to get better? I mean, that's the other part of it. And the reality that the Nuggets are probably they're going to face, right? Because in all likelihood, even though the Nuggets have not been ruled out as a landing spot for LeBron, I just laid out how the Nuggets don't have a monopoly on they don't have a monopoly on the golf, on, LeBron's buddies, geography, any of that, or being the best, easiest path to win a title. The Nuggets aren't the number one in any of those categories. So it does look like LeBron James isn't going to come to the Denver Nuggets. But the reality facing Denver, if LeBron's not coming, is how are you going to be better? Because I think if you're a Nuggets fan, maybe you don't want LeBron, and that's fine and that's fair. But you can't possibly expect the Denver Nuggets to be better than they were this past season if they do not add anybody to the roster, which is kind of what it's looking like, with all due respect to Marvin Bagley. But there's some news on that front that I want to share with you at the top of the hour regarding the Nuggets' moves this offseason. I do want to shift gears, and I'll take your thoughts on LeBron if we just want to do an informal poll on whether you actually even want the guy to be in Colorado, because every time I bring it up, I feel like I don't have anybody standing next to me saying, you know what, Ryan, I would like to have LeBron. I don't think I've gotten one call or text, which I'm not saying is indicative of the entire Nuggets fan base, but I do find it very interesting when it comes to this audience. So 719-247-1313, your thoughts on your want level in terms of LeBron coming to the Denver Nuggets. But I did want to get into this because of the U.S. men's national team dominating the conversation yesterday. There were some things left over from over the weekend, and this is part of the design of a Friday news dump, right? That it gets kind of lost in the shuffle. There's other things that come up, but I do want to talk about it. And it was news on Friday that Nate Pine is not going to be the director of athletics anymore at the Air Force Academy. And the Gazette did a phenomenal job, as they always do, in covering Air Force, and I'm sure if you are an interested party, you know some of the details surrounding that. But it brings up what is the constant balance that institution has to strike that other colleges don't. And it's a fairly obvious one, right? You know, all these academic institutions, and I say academic because not that, I mean, Air Force is one of the best academic institutions you could possibly go to, but obviously you look at that more, you know, a military academy as opposed to, you know, a Stanford, a Cal, whatever, what have you. But they can say that they're focused on, you know, the academic side and everything. But in those, and that's a balance they have to strike, but it seems like it's easier for them because they will, it's like we got enough students when it comes to the raising the academic level. We want to win football games, right? But at Air Force, and Army and Navy are absolutely in this boat as well. No Navy pun intended there. That every student that comes through one of these academies is going on to one of the highest callings that anybody can ever have, which is serving and protecting the country, right? As a member of the Navy, the Air Force, Army. And the constant balance that has to be struck is, what are they there for primarily? And I think we can all acknowledge that other than a Paul Skeens or a Griffin Jacks or a athlete here and there, like the Air Force is where they're going. So I don't begrudge anybody who's a superintendent of the school, especially one that comes, you know, from the Air Force, obviously, to say, no, the most important thing is getting them ready to serve our country. But I still am one, and there are plenty of people at the Air Force Academy that still believe in the value of the athletic department as a recruiting tool, as a public-facing entity, and also helpful in the development of the future leaders of character that they talk about. And so I am somebody, and sometimes they have had it, certainly with Richard Clark, there was somebody who maybe struck that balance in a great way. And I don't think that it's necessarily wrong that somebody wants to go the other way and say it's more about the military, but that obviously being such a stark change from what it used to be caused some problems. But it's a constant balance that has to go on up there. What is the importance of the athletic department to a school like that? And should the athletic department be able to function more like your traditional athletic department? Or is this just some kind of side thing that's getting in the way of the main objective for students at the Air Force Academy? It's a unique balance that only a couple of other institutions in our country have to strike, but it's one that Air Force has to deal with. And that obviously, according to the reporting from the Gazette, kind of led to, you know, this move happening. That Nate Pine and the superintendent didn't really see eye to eye on a lot of this stuff. Hopefully, who the next superintendent is, who in what is now Dr. Nancy Hickson, who's taken over for Nate Pine, hopefully they can strike that balance well, because I am one, obviously, who thinks that the athletic department is important to the Air Force Academy. And the Air Force Air Force Academy has been able to be competitive and achieve new highest of heights. You think about the run that Troy Calhoun's teams have been on, or what Frank Saratori's teams have done, or what Stacey McIntyre's team did this year. I hope that the new leadership up there can strike that balance between understanding there is a higher calling, and most of the students, even the athletes, are going to be serving our country. More after this. Welcome in. Thanks for tuning in, whether you're listening to the show or whether you're watching the show. Anywhere you scroll, just follow at 740 KVOR, at Extra Sports 1300 on your social media platform of choice. We are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, we are on Twitch, we are on X, and we are on Instagram. And if there's one that we're missing, don't worry, we'll find it and get the show up there. While you're on said social media platform, feel free to join the conversation by dropping a comment, or if you are listening to the show, you could call or text in at 719-247-1313. So the Denver Nuggets today have made a move, and this is their third transaction of the summer, correct? Tyus Jones, Marvin Bagley, and now this is a player on his way out. Jonas Valanciunas has been waived. This is not a surprise. This has been anticipated. In fact, I've been saying Jonas Valanciunas would be one and done in Denver from basically the minute he signed. Right? Because he went through all that tug of war between the Denver Nuggets and that team in Greece. And I said, I think that Jonas Valanciunas is going to play 1 year in Denver, and then he's going to be out of the NBA. And we'll see if that happens to be the case, because Jonas Valanciunas is reportedly drawing interest from the Knicks, who just lost Mitchell Robinson, from the Lakers, although the Lakers made the trade for Walker Kessler and they signed Kevon Looney. So I don't know if the Lakers are necessarily a fit anymore for Jonas Valanciunas. But therein lies the interesting aspect of this. And I keep asking myself this question. Why didn't Jonas Valanciunas work in Denver? Like, my initial premise when he signed, because of the overtures made by the team in Greece, I thought that that's where his heart was, that he wanted to go overseas and play. But when he showed up in Denver and said he was totally committed, and early in the season, like so many Denver Nuggets, looked very good, like, why couldn't that have been sustained to the point where him being waived was not going to be a thing? Why did Jonas Valanciunas not work? To me, as a player, there's only one that the Nuggets have ever had in the Nikola Jokic era that I thought was a better fit behind Nikola Jokic than Jonas Valanciunas, and it was DeMarcus Cousins. But that was very short-lived. I mean, the Valanciunas thing should have worked, right? I mean, he plays the game. I'm not saying anybody is like Nikola Jokic, but you could run the two-man game, the pick and roll. The guy rebounds. He's a good passer. Has a little bit of touch on his jump shot. Like, why didn't this work? It just makes you wonder, can the Nuggets ever get somebody to be a true backup center for Nikola Jokic? And it's the most bizarre thing, because even setting aside, I get it, you're not going to find somebody who can make the non-Jokic minutes not a thing anymore. I think after Jonas Valanciunas, we have to say it's just not possible, because Nikola Jokic elevates the team so much that there's just not another human being that you're going to be able to bring in when Nikola Jokic is on the bench and make you not miss Nikola Jokic. Right? But I'm saying that it seems like the Nuggets don't even want to try and play the same way. Like, I thought the strength of having a DeMarcus Cousins a few years ago, or having Jonas Valanciunas, was that you didn't have to completely alter what you did from an offensive standpoint. Yes, it wouldn't be as effective, but you wouldn't have to have two playbooks essentially. But I think that's exactly what the Nuggets are opting for. Like, if you look at Marvin Bagley, he's not a backup center. He's not a similar player to Jonas Valanciunas or Mason Plumlee or DeMarcus Cousins. Like, if he's a backup to anybody, he's a backup to Aaron Gordon. And it seems like the Denver Nuggets just don't even want to play the same way. Like, David Adelman didn't want to play Jonas Valanciunas and kept talking about how that team got ran off the floor with smaller lineups. So he wants a smaller lineup. He's going to play Deron Holmes and Marvin Bagley together. Neither are centers. Neither, if you squinted and tilted your head and stared into the sun, could you even see anything even close to the type of player Nikola Jokic is. But it's just, that's the way they've decided because they're getting run off the floor. And to some extent, that makes sense to me. But also, then why are other teams wanting Jonas Valanciunas? Like, shouldn't the Knicks be saying, okay, Mitchell Robinson is gone. Now we could play small ball. But no, they're interested in Valanciunas. You have the Lakers getting Walker Kessler and getting Kevon Looney. So they want centers. Teams still want centers. Are they not worried about their second unit getting run off the floor? I almost wonder if it's David Adelman wants to play a certain way, and Nikola Jokic existing throws a wrench in that. And I don't mean in a bad way, because you adjust to your personnel, right? But I think David Adelman, in a world where he didn't have Nikola Jokic, may be kind of anti-big, anti-center. But if you have Nikola Jokic, you got to tailor what you do around him. But if Nikola Jokic is on the bench, it's almost like David Adelman's like, I'm going to play my way now, which is not with having a backup center. That is with these stretch fours and Marvin Bagley and Deron Holmes. So it is really, and there's a financial component, of course, because you're getting Marvin Bagley for pennies on the dollar compared to what you were paying Jonas Valanciunas. If they didn't waive him, he'd be making $10 million. Okay. Marvin Bagley's making like not even $500,000, or it might be $500,000. Look and see what it is. It's not 10. Yeah, it's $3 million. $3.5 million. So still a pretty big discrepancy between what Marvin Bagley is going to make and what Jonas Valanciunas would have made. And that's part of it. But the Nuggets are facing a reality here that I don't think if they ever wanted to shed payroll are going to be able to now. The market for Peyton Watson has dried up, but the Nuggets aren't going to squeeze Peyton Watson to the point where they're making him take the qualifying offer. Because then if he accepts the qualifying offer, he can leave as an unrestricted free agent. The Nuggets don't want Peyton Watson for a year. They want him for multiple years. So they're going to have to pay him more than that. But it just doesn't seem like there was the willingness or the market for the Nuggets to be able to dump contracts. So maybe Jonas Valanciunas, waiving him and having Marvin Bagley can keep them out of the second apron, but Peyton Watson is going to cost them a lot, and multiplied because they're going to be in the tax. So I say all that to, I don't know that the Nuggets that this makes all the difference in the world for the Denver Nuggets. Maybe it does. Maybe this is the difference between the first apron and the second apron. But from a basketball standpoint, which we care more about, we talk too much about contracts and maxes and super maxes and aprons and repeater taxes. From a basketball standpoint, I can't sit here and say unequivocally that Jonas Valanciunas should remain on the Denver Nuggets. I don't know that you saw enough last year to say, oh, yeah, got to have this guy back. But at the same time, I think to myself, why didn't this work? But clearly it didn't. So now with Valanciunas gone, it becomes all about Peyton Watson and what they're going to do. And as I said, I don't think the end game here is for the Denver Nuggets to get Peyton Watson to sign the qualifying offer, which is probably about what Marvin Bagley makes, just to have Peyton Watson for a year and then say goodbye to him. Because there's no way Peyton Watson's re-signing in Denver if he has to play under the qualifying offer this year. It's like guys who play under the franchise tag in the NFL. A lot of those guys are like, the minute I become a free agent, I'm out of here. But they don't have to pay him and shouldn't pay him upwards of $30 million. And I was never on board with the idea that the Nuggets should just shed payroll and just drop players so they could get under the tax. I don't care about that. But I also acknowledge that you have to be somewhat fiscally responsible. And it would be irresponsible to have Christian Braun making $25 million and Peyton Watson more than that. So whatever the number ends up being, and there's still the Clippers, I guess, hanging out there, that there may be a sign and trade. And look, depending on what assets they get in return, I wouldn't lose a lot of sleep over losing Peyton Watson, because it seems like the Nuggets are definitely going to have Cam Johnson. They turned down multiple trade offers for Cam Johnson. They offered up Aaron Gordon reportedly for Jaylen Brown. The Celtics said no. So it looks like Aaron Gordon's going to be back. Yes, you need depth, and Peyton Watson provides depth. But if Clippers are going to offer some good assets in a sign and trade, then I would be all ears. But the bottom line when it comes to Peyton Watson is things have broken in the Nuggets' favor. There was a day where it was going to be a feeding frenzy for Peyton Watson. It would be the Lakers and the Nets and the Bulls and the Jazz and all of these teams, and now it's whittled down to one. And I think that allows the Denver Nuggets a real opportunity here to say, yeah, we want to keep you long-term. We want to sign you to a multi-year deal. So we're not talking about the qualifying offer. But at the same time, we're not going to – you don't have another suitor that's willing to offer you upwards of $30 million. We're not going to do that either. But that will be the next domino, if you will, to fall for the Denver Nuggets now that Jonas Valanciunas has been waived. If you're wondering about the numbers, $2 million remains on the cap. The Nuggets can, in the next month, decide to stretch that. So it would be, over multiple years. So it wouldn't be the $2 million hit they take all this year. Certainly not Russell Wilson's dead cap hit, right? But it would be 2 of the $10 million that he would have been paid this year that the Nuggets are still on the hook for. And this team's still got to fill out their roster. Right? It's the starting 5 from last year. Let's say Peyton Watson is back. You signed Tyus Jones and Marvin Bagley. You're going to need to fill out this roster. And another aspect of this Nuggets team going into this year that we've debated, there's no choice anymore. With the way it's looking, Deron Holmes and Julian Strawther have got to play. This is not me saying that I think either are capable of great things. I mean, I've kind of seen a fair amount of Julian Strawther. I don't know that it's going to get that much better at this stage of his career. Deron Holmes, certainly you feel like there's more upside because we haven't even seen the guy play in the NBA regular season yet. But I don't think he's going to be this massive difference maker, but they got to play. These are guys on your roster. You're not adding anybody. We've debated this for too long. There's no debate anymore. And maybe the fact that there's no debate anymore makes you feel sad if you're a Nuggets fan because you don't believe that Deron Holmes or Julian Strawther can be a huge difference maker for this team. But they got to play. And they got to play decent minutes. They can't be marooned to the end of the bench. You got to see what you have in these guys because it's, while it is good, I think overall that the Nuggets did not go through with this supposed plan to dump salary. I think that is the worst case scenario for this Denver Nuggets offseason is not happening. So that's a good thing. But now you're looking at it and you're saying this team's not any better. They're the same. So how are they going to be expected to beat Minnesota or Oklahoma City? Deron Holmes? More minutes for Julian Strawther? Or you're just banking on slim down Nikola Jokic, healthy Aaron Gordon, maybe making the difference. 719-24-7, 1313. Take your thoughts on the Nuggets waiving Jonas Valanciunas. I thought it could have had a chance to work. I really did. And it did not. But that is one player off the board for the Denver Nuggets, will not be a part of the Nuggets this upcoming season. Coming up next, a member of the U.S. men's national team apologizes to you for what happened against Belgium. That's next. Off day today in the World Cup, and then we basically just get one match a day. Tomorrow will be France and Morocco. That will be a great one. And then Friday, tier, the match that the USA was going to be in, but instead it will be Belgium taking on Spain Friday afternoon. Now, I guess at this point, definitely not have that game in prime time. If it was the U.S. and they were playing at 1 o'clock, it would be like, oh, this isn't great. People got to work. You're putting the biggest match in the history of U.S. soccer, men's U.S. soccer at the very least, at 1 o'clock Mountain Time on a Friday. But we don't have to worry about that anymore, do we? Because it will be Belgium and it will be Spain, and that is the perfect game to put at 1 o'clock. Because if you really want to watch it, then you got your excuse to get out of work, but you're not feeling like you're missing anything if you can't, because the U.S. is not playing. It has been remarkable to me to see how quickly the shift has happened. Right. I know there were some weren't great feelings after the loss to Turkey, but I think there was enough optimism because you saw when Christian Pulisic came into the game how different the U.S. looked, and you could say over 90 minutes, if everybody would have been available, then the U.S. would have beaten Turkey. So I think it didn't derail the good vibes train too much. And then they beat Bosnia, and then there was the red card, right? And the vibes went down a little bit. And then there was the overturn of the suspension, and then I think the vibes went down a little bit more because of the controversy that was around it. And then it all went away. Everything came crashing down against Belgium. And the guy at the center of kind of all of it was Flo Balogun. And Balogun had some things to say to the media and on social media after what had been a very tumultuous couple of days for him, few days actually, going back to the actual red card itself. One thing, Balogun talking about him being allowed to play, said, I accepted the decision when I was given the red card. Then I also accepted the decision when I could play. There's not much else I can really say on the matter. And there's not. And that's why I said when the decision came down from FIFA, I said it kind of puts the U.S. men's national team and Flo Balogun in kind of a precarious position. Because what is he supposed to say? Like, this is BS that I'm being allowed to play? I'm going to sit out anyway? And it's also him being classy about it to not, go on a rant about the red card, which we feel like he had every reason, right, to be upset with that, to feel hard done by that. But he kept it consistent. And I just think it's a tough spot for him to be in, and I don't think he needs to say more than he said. I mean, if he was reinstated to play, then he's going to want to play and should. What goes on above his pay grade or whatever you want to call it between FIFA and the president, that's them. Flo Balogun has nothing to do with that. So for him to, say one way or another, like, way to go, or say this is nonsense, I mean, I don't think it would help. So I think he answered that properly, and it was a tough place for him to be put into. because I'm sure he was happy that he was going to play. But this is, I think, the lasting story here is not so much, the stuff with Balogun is kind of was pushed to the side. It wouldn't have been if the U.S. would have won. But because they lost, I think the temperature surrounding the reversal or the suspension of the suspension has kind of dissipated a little bit, because now it's just about how bad the U.S. men's national team looked. And Flo Balogun said on X, "My debut World Cup, it hurts to wait 4 years to compete at the highest level our sport has to offer. I want to say sorry to our fans. It was not good enough when it mattered most, and we let you down." That is what you want to hear if you're a fan of the U.S. men's national team, as opposed to Christian Pulisic saying his ankle will be okay because now he gets to rest. You don't want to hear that, because for you, you don't care what happens with AC Milan. Like you don't care that he's going to be available for, the upcoming Serie A season. And even if he was playing in MLS or accepted the reported offer that was out there from New York City FC, you would still not care. It's like, this is the most important team that you play for. We can't say that about all of our sports, right? Especially like the NBA. Be honest. What's more important to you? Team USA or your favorite team, Nuggets, Celtics, etc.? With if NFL players play in the Olympics in 28, I think you'll certainly say, well, I don't want Bo Nix or Patrick Mahomes or whatever to get hurt in the Olympics for my team. But with soccer, it's in the NHL, you probably care to some degree more about your favorite team than Team USA. And this doesn't mean that you don't root for Team USA. It's just you're a little bit more invested. With soccer, it's like the national team means everything. And the clubs that these guys play for mean very little. So Christian Pulisic sharing the thoughts that he did about being able to rest for the, he didn't say for the upcoming season, but he just said he'd be able to rest so the ankle would be better. It's like, for what, dude? Most people won't care about you for another 4 years. This was it. So you want to hear what Flo Balogun said and say, like, understanding. I think that's the biggest thing. Understanding what that moment meant to the sport, to this country, to the people who were cheering you on, and understanding that for them, that was everything. And what Flo Balogun is going to end up doing for his club is not very important to a lot of people who tuned in to that game against Belgium the other night. So yes, these guys' careers go on and they have a lot of different goals for their careers. And it's not just winning the World Cup. But in that moment, after you put on an embarrassing effort against Belgium, you don't want to hear about the future. You don't want to hear about what's next. This was all that mattered. And Flo Balogun seemed to understand that a little bit more than Christian Pulisic. And, it's why the guy that continues to take some of the heat here, even another day removed, is Pulisic. I mean, he's still being criticized from a lot of different outlets and in many ways has become the face of the U.S.'s failure, which is fair and unfair. It's unfair because it's a team game, and he certainly wasn't the only player who played terribly against Belgium. But again, there are some sports, we talk about this all the time when it comes to hockey. You wear that C, it matters. You wear a C in football, and with all due respect, I don't care about who the captains of any NFL team are. That doesn't mean nearly what it means in hockey. Wearing the captain's armband in soccer means as much as wearing the C in hockey. You're the representative. You're the face of the team. And even if Pulisic wasn't wearing the captain's armband, he would be that for many people. But the fact that he's the captain, he's the face, and he became the face of their failure. Not just because he was the face to begin with, but the visual of him subbing out with over a half an hour left in the match. And then him saying what he said about, the ankle's going to be fine now because he'll have rest. Or that's the good thing, is that he'll be able to rest. And it goes back to what I said yesterday in terms of what the issue is with the U.S. men's national team. It's not talent. I think it's mentality. Now, Flo Balogun might have the mentality that you want. I don't know that there's enough of it. Flo Balogun, by the way, nobody wants to hear this because in the end it doesn't matter because the U.S. got destroyed. But Flo Balogun was arguably the best player on the U.S. men's national team the other night against Belgium. And then he came out and apologized and acknowledged the way that soccer fans were feeling about it. Instead of saying, we'll get him next time, it was, this sucked. And we know it. And we know that you invested a lot in following us and cheering for us. Did you see some of the ticket prices for that match? That's a guy who gets it. I don't know that the captain of the U.S. men's national team understands it. But it brings up another question that is lingering, and that's the future of Mauricio Pochettino. And I think there are some people in the media that are trying to launch a preemptive strike here. Because to me, I'm not saying that Mauricio Pochettino and his record and what happened the other night is grounds for the U.S., falling over themselves to extend his contract. But I think we found that Pochettino, I think he did a better job than his predecessor. I think you could say that. And I don't think he was the issue. If you are somewhat unimpressed by what Pochettino did, I think you got to look at the players more, at that as an indictment of the players more than on him, because this is the ultimate, who are you going to get that's better? Jurgen Klopp is coaching Germany now. Who are you going to get that's better than Mauricio Pochettino? Maybe you don't throw every dime you have at him. Maybe you're not going to say all is ruined and the U.S. has no hope if he ends up leaving. But that's also because you feel like after the performance against Belgium, the U.S. has no hope. But come on, Mauricio Pochettino wasn't the problem, and I thought he did a very good job. He had to try to change the mentality, change some of the tactics. He had a lot of work he had to do to at least get the U.S. to what they did. To me, it feels unfinished. I would like to see him go on, even though my expectations for the U.S. are not going to grow. I'd like to see him continue it and just see what happens rather than starting over in that regard. But maybe they need a full reset. 719-247-1313. Back after this. 719-247-1313, sifting through the rubble of the U.S.'s disastrous end to the World Cup. Where do they go from here? And who's taking most of the blame? I think Christian Pulisic rightly is taking a fair amount of blame. A couple of really good texts from Chris says, dude, Pulisic sucks, and I don't know why he's the face of the U.S. men's national team. Hooray for that stupid commercial with Billy Bob. If you're not, I think it's a beer commercial. It's Billy Bob, and it's Lionel Messi and Pulisic, and they're playing soccer in a posh hotel, which I have been to many posh hotels. None of them allow you to play soccer in the lobby. So very unrealistic commercial. And then the most important point from Chris, what has he done in the last 6 years? What is anybody on Team USA? I mean, we have to be fair there, right? What member of the U.S. men's national team has done a lot? I think at his best, Christian Pulisic is the most talented player on the U.S. men's national team. But didn't show. He didn't play as much as we were hoping he would. But again, he was Paraguay could not defend him in the first match. And when he came on against Turkey, it completely changed the outlook of that match. So I don't want to completely... My criticism of Christian Pulisic is in the biggest moment, the biggest match, you are somebody who has made a lot of appearances for this team. You're playing at one of the highest levels in the world that not everybody on that U.S. men's national team can say. You're the first person that people expect to have a good performance. But what you bring up, and I think some people are saying, look at what he's done in Italy. He hasn't done a lot. And that's all fair, but at the same time, who's better than him? Who's more talented than him? Maybe you could say now Flo Balogun is, Weston McKennie. I think brand recognition was certainly a big reason why he became the face of the team. But that's not going to be the case anymore. However he got here to being the face of the team and the captain, that's over now, right? I would expect somebody else to be wearing the captain's armband for the next World Cup. But you're right. The accomplishment hasn't been there from Christian Pulisic, but the talent, you have to say, when he's at his best, is as good as anyone, if not better than anyone on the U.S. men's national team, which makes his no-show performance stand out even more than the rest of the no-show performances of that. There were many against Belgium. Chris with another one. As a Tottenham fan, I love Coach Poach, but the players, the system of producing talent in this country, and our hubris will not let this team move forward. Poach needs to stay, but he needs to treat these players as European clubs do and not kowtow to them. Balogun shouldn't have started even after the reversal. They prepped without him, but Ope Trump, we have to play him, and he did nothing. Coach Poach needs to be the coach. Yeah, and that's where I'll say, and there's a lot there, but I'll start with it feels like we're back at square one with the U.S. men's national team. But I'd like Pochettino, to your point, Chris, to be the guy to lead them from square one. Right? I don't see how there's somebody else out there that is going to be better than him. And we also can't, even though I think you could say that this wasn't a successful World Cup because the expectation was not met. This team raised the bar and then fell well short of it. But there are some good ideas there. I don't know if they're ever going to be implemented in a real way that the players are going to take to it, that this group of players are going to take to it. But I'm with you. I like Mauricio Pochettino. And if I have my druthers, he remains the head coach. I understand that the result at the World Cup is not one that he should hold U.S. soccer hostage. But I think the general sentiment should be we'd like this guy back. But I think you and I are in agreement that the other night was more of a referendum on the players than the coach. And sometimes that you place blame on a coach for not getting the most out of his players. I think it's, in this case, you don't do that because you've seen this team do something similar under a different head coach. It seems to be, unfortunately, more ingrained in their DNA as players. Like, I'll make the comparison with David Adelman. Okay, we've seen these players on the Denver Nuggets be capable of more under Michael Malone. They have championship DNA. We've seen that. So when David Adelman can't seem to bring it out of him, that's where you start to look at the coach and like, are you really the right guy for the job? Because we've seen this team, this core of players, achieve a lot. With the U.S. men's national team, you really haven't seen this U.S. team achieve a whole lot. And you've seen it under different managers to where I don't think you put it on Pochettino. Didn't do enough to help, perhaps, is the way you want to put it. But I think the problem is more with the players here. Find a different captain. I would say, you know what, Weston McKennie, Flo Balogun would be good to push as the face of the team. And don't forget Tyler Adams. Not saying that he was spectacular the other night by any stretch of the imagination, but there are other guys. We have gotten to know these players. You don't have to go with the easiest one. You can hold up a Flo Balogun or a Weston McKennie and say, this is now the face of U.S. soccer. I think that that's point they need to marginalize Christian Pulisic. I'm not saying he shouldn't be on the team moving forward, but maybe minimize, kind of move off of him a little bit as being the face and try to extend Pochettino, try to get him to stay. I think that's what they need. U.S. soccer needs to do moving forward, and then go from there. I didn't think it would be the other night. I really didn't. I thought it would be Friday. I thought it would be Friday that this team was going to get smacked around. And I still, with 24 additional hours to reflect, I still don't believe that Belgium is that much more talented than the United States. So if it's not really coaching, not really talent, I think it's a mentality. I'd like to give Pochettino more time to be able to instill a better mindset, to your point, Chris. Man, that was ugly, though. But no excuses. No excuses. Flo Balogun played. He started. They were full strength. And I'm saying that as opposed to Egypt, who maybe has a legitimate gripe about their exit. The U.S. doesn't have a legitimate gripe. That's on you. Egypt's exit against Argentina, still mostly on them. They conceded those goals. But, man, questionable decisions. And Egypt is making a big stink out of the whole thing. Probably as they should. 719-247-1313. What's driving the show is next. Hello there. Welcome in. Great to have you, whether you're listening on Extra Sports 1300, 740 KVOR, the apps of those two fine radio stations, or you're watching this show, as more and more of you are doing every day, anywhere you scroll: Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch. I'm there. This show is there. Love to be talking to you there. If you'd like to take your participation in today's show to the next level, you could do that. Simply drop a comment on the live stream that you are currently watching, or you could call or text into the show at 719-247-1313. Perhaps you have a take on one of or more of these, the three stories that are driving this show. All right, let us begin. You know that college football is right around the corner when we have media days. The Big 12 had theirs, which means Coach Prime spoke.
My younger self would be proud that I was here last year fighting a battle called cancer, and now I'm here with full strength, full energy. I got that thing back. I got that swagger back. I got that dog back. I got that charisma back.
That is Deion Sanders at Big 12 Media Day. And look, I am thrilled that he has beaten his health issues, and it is great to see. And there's a noticeable difference between Deion Sanders a year ago and the other day. So, and that is a great story. And hopefully that means that he is locked in. And I've heard some things out of Boulder that his hours are getting longer at the facility. He can spend more time and be more involved in things than maybe he was last year with all the doctor's appointments. And that's all great, legitimately. But his swagger, his charisma, his energy, all of those things that he mentioned are back. They better produce wins, right? They better start moving the needle forward for this Colorado Buffaloes team. Because since the way that the 9-win season he had, that peak there with, Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, it was really bad. And I think you look at Deion Sanders' tenure in its totality, and you're like, there was some good that one year. Overall, not enough of it. This is a year that he needs to move this program forward. And I mean that obviously most of all when it comes to wins and losses, but also just it's felt like a circus. It's felt like the program has been in disarray with the coaching changes and switching out assistants, quarterback changes, everything like that. Maybe the first thing is stabilize the program, have some continuity, and maybe that leads to wins. But as we sit here a little bit more than a month and a half away from the college football season, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of juice surrounding the program in Boulder. I think there are a lot of people that are like, okay, that whole shtick of Deion Sanders, that's great, and that's fun sometimes, but like if you're not going to win football games, we really don't care. I think this is a big year for Deion Sanders, and it's good that he's healthy, regardless of the situation in Boulder. It's great that he's healthy, but hopefully that leads to him being able to, again, stabilize this program and get it moving in the right direction again. And he could do that with Julian Lewis as his quarterback. Don't forget, A lot of schools were after Julian Lewis. So maybe there should be some cautious optimism in Boulder, but the over-the-top hype, I don't know that people are really getting into it this time around. It's more of a win some football games. And if he does, that hype train, it'll start back up quickly. That's the thing. Is like, I know right now, I think a lot of people are kind of worn out by Deion Sanders. And I think given how bad it looked last year, that there are people that don't really want to buy in to what CU is doing. But if they get some success this season, I think that hype starts right back up again. I don't think it'll take much. I don't think all hope is lost in terms of that, but it's got to be winning that leads to it. Deion Sanders' press conferences are not going to get it done. It has to be the Colorado Buffaloes winning on the football field. I want to talk more about the Big 12, a piece of business they conducted with a certain energy drink company that I find to be interesting. But for now, let's shift gears. Story number 2, that it is not a surprise, but the Denver Nuggets today, because they had to today, waived Jonas Valanciunas. And by doing that, they will essentially only have to pay him $2 of the $10 million that he was going to be owed. They can also stretch that out over a number of years and make the cap hit not as bad. But this was always going to happen, that Jonas Valanciunas was not going to be a member of the Denver Nuggets. I said it the minute that he arrived in Denver, that I didn't think he was long for it. But I thought it was more because the allure and the call of going overseas and playing in Europe was what was going to pull him away from Denver. Now that the season has played out, I think there's a practical reason for waiving him, and that's that he wasn't that impactful, which is a little bit confusing to me. Still, one of the things left over from the Nuggets season that I don't quite have my head wrapped around. Why didn't he work? Should have. And I'm not talking about, the Twin Towers, David Robinson and Tim Duncan, him and Nikola Jokic. But I'm just saying, like David Adelman didn't even want to play this guy in the playoffs. Like, he played the fewest number of games, the fewest minutes, and some of that has to do with Nikola Jokic playing so many minutes. But it just, I think you say at the end of it, this 1-year experiment of Jonas Valanciunas, it didn't work. And from the type of player that he is, the size that he is, the position that he plays, it should have been one of the better shots the Nuggets took at having a serviceable backup to Nikola Jokic. But it didn't really work. It didn't work to justify paying him $10 million when you could pay Marvin Bagley 3.5. Now, Marvin Bagley is not supposed to be a facsimile of Jonas Valanciunas, not the same type of player. The Nuggets are essentially playing next season without a backup center. They have essentially said, forget us trying to get a center to be a stopgap in the non-Jokic minutes. We're going to play a different style of basketball. And you saw in the postseason, David Adelman, part of the reason why he didn't want to play Jonas Valanciunas was because he was worried that smaller teams were going to run the Nuggets off the floor. So he wants a team that's a bench that's more athletic, that can get up and down the floor themselves. You would think with a player like Nikola Jokic, with the fact that your center is the centerpiece of your team, that you would want a backup center. David Adelman doesn't. And I can't say that's a terrible idea because the Nuggets have yet to figure out that position. So I don't think it's the worst idea to try and do something different with Bagley and with Deron Holmes basically as two stretch fours rather than a true center to back up Nikola Jokic. But how will we remember the Jonas Valanciunas era in Denver? Not a lot of highlights. And now for the Denver Nuggets, all the attention, unless you're still, following Braun Watch, which I am, and I'll report back. But unless you're holding out hope that LeBron James is going to join this team, everything in Nuggets land is about Peyton Watson. And what do they do now? And Bobby Marks, ESPN's NBA cap guru, says if the Nuggets stretch Jonas Valanciunas' dead cap hit, there'll be between $7 and $8 million under the second apron. Peyton Watson's going to make more than $8 million this upcoming season, right? So this team seems like it's going to go into the second apron, doesn't it? Which I thought the last thing that this team was going to do. So that's kind of the last piece of the puzzle here is what they are going to do with Peyton Watson. Wide range of potential outcomes. But it looks like Peyton Watson will be back with the Denver Nuggets. I mean, all these suitors are bowing out left and right. It seems like the Nuggets can have him if they want him. But by signing him even to a reasonable contract, a contract that I'm okay with signing Peyton Watson to, which is far less than the $30 million that has been thrown around, I mean, it's still going to put him in the second apron. And I thought that was the thing that Josh Kroenke said could not happen because they would have to contemplate trading Nikola Jokic. So a bizarre offseason that you don't quite understand what direction the Nuggets are going in is going to continue that way until we figure out what happens with Peyton Watson. Really and truly. Is it the qualifying offer? Is it a sign and trade? Is he going to get a Christian Brown type deal? We don't know. But he's the next domino. And then when whatever they're going to do with Peyton Watson happens, then we can go, okay, this is what the Nuggets ended up doing. Is this at all what we thought they were going to do? No Tim Hardaway, no Jonas Valanciunas. You add Marvin Bagley and you keep Peyton Watson. That's essentially what it looks like the extent of the Nuggets offseason moves are. When you've offered up Cam Johnson to try and get Jaylen Brown, but then turned down other offers for Cam Johnson and have apparently kept Jamal Murray completely off the trade block. More on that coming up. But I go to story number 3, which is the fallout from the U.S. men's national team loss against Belgium. A guy that is become the face of their failure in this World Cup, Christian Pulisic, took to social media after Flo Balogun did it as well. And he said on Instagram, tough to find the words. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who believed. The support carried us all the way through. It simply wasn't good enough from us in the end, and I wanted to deliver so much more. I still feel blessed to be a part of this team. The memories this summer will last a lifetime. It's just the start for us and for this sport in America. There is so much there that I do not agree with. Let me take the first thing that's going to probably jump out to you and it's going to jump out to most people. In the end, it wasn't good enough from us in the end. I think we could agree on that. And I wanted to deliver so much more. How about another 30 minutes? I feel like that might have been within your power. And I hate to go this route, but I mean, this was the Super Bowl. This was the Game 7 of the NBA Finals. I mean, this was it. Could you truly have not found a way to stay in there for more than an hour? Less than an hour. So when he says, I wanted to deliver so much more, I think there are going to be a lot of soccer fans that are going, you could have. You could have, and you didn't. And that's part of why he's being criticized today and yesterday and will continue to be. Now, the last part of it, it's just the start for us and the start of this sport in America. I do not share in that optimism. I think the personnel is going to have to look very different 4 years from now to get me to even entertain the possibility that the U.S. men's national team is capable of taking a step forward. Have to be a very different looking team. Because this team was supposed to learn the lessons from the last World Cup. Right? They're still young guys, but they're not young necessarily in their experience. They were 4 years ago. So they were supposed to learn the lessons now. Didn't seem like they did. Is there a lot of optimism right now that they will 4 years from now? I don't think that there is. So I don't think, I think Christian Pulisic's post is going to go over like a lead balloon with U.S. soccer fans. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. That is, of course, what's going on in the sports world today. How about what's going on in the financial world? It's time for our daily market report with Rick Stevens from FRS Financial Group. We call it the RBG report, Rick's best guess. Rick, what happened today?
Well, markets were disturbed today, Ryan, by the ongoing fight with Iran. As those missile strikes got carried out overnight, our markets fell across the board today, but not all companies were down, as both Broadcom and Arista Networks showed gains above 4% on the day. Big winner today, though, was crude oil. As prices surged ahead for both West Texas and Brent crude, they were up $4 and $5 per barrel, respectively. Both, however, are still under that $80 per barrel number. Today's best guess, though, is that the most recent tantrum by the Iranian regime has probably entered them into the final find-out stage, and perhaps that next ceasefire will stick, helping to alleviate some of those inflationary concerns. That is today's RBG report.
Thanks, Rick. That's Rick Stevens of FRS Financial Group right here in Colorado Springs. Start planning your future today at frsfinancialgroup.com.
Products and investment services offered through LPL Financial, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC. FRS Financial Group is a name used by independent advisors associated with LPL Financial, LLC.
Coming up next on Drive Time Sports, could a view into the mind of Brad Stevens on why he made the trade with Jaylen Brown be a sign of the future for the Denver Nuggets star duo? That's next on Extra Sports 1300 and 740 KVOR. It was not a fun press conference for Brad Stevens, having to explain why he traded Jaylen Brown and why, more importantly, in my mind, he traded him to Philadelphia. But before I get into that, there was something that Brad Stevens said as justification for the trade that I think is worth noting when it comes to the Denver Nuggets. Here's what Brad Stevens said in part as he was justifying trading Jaylen Brown.
The path looked a little bit more challenging with 70% of our cap and such a high percent of our usage tied into two players. And the reality in this era and in this day and age of the NBA, and you could see it obviously with the last couple of champions and some of the teams that were at the very top of the league when it was all said and done at the end of this year, is that, you know, you have to do a great job and you have to have the optionality to do a great job of building out depth that can hopefully replace the irreplaceable individual.
Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic this season will take up 67% of the Nuggets' total cap space. And here's still, even with the Jaylen Brown trade, widely considered one of the brightest minds in any NBA front office, Brad Stevens, saying we can't win when two players are making 70% of our cap. Now, there's a little bit of a nuanced difference because on top of the fact that the two of them would take up 70% of the Celtics cap space, they are two very similar players. So I think that was another thing on top of it where it's like, well, now it's even more of a reason to move on from one of them because they are so similar as players and they're taking up 70% of our cap. But if this is something that is going to take hold around the league, that having two players taking up 70% of your cap is not a way to win, the next team that's going to be looking to break up their duo would have to be the Denver Nuggets, wouldn't it? Wouldn't they have to be? And if they were of like mind with Brad Stevens, why is it that we're not hearing any reports of Jamal Murray getting traded? We haven't even heard. The only thing I've heard relating to Jamal Murray is based on, coincidentally, the Nuggets' pitch to the Celtics to try and get Jaylen Brown by trading Aaron Gordon and Cam Johnson, reportedly. I think along with that report was the idea that the Nuggets weren't including Jamal Murray in any trade discussions. For Josh Kroenke to say that everybody, not named Nikola Jokic, is tradable on the Denver Nuggets, and now Jamal Murray, it doesn't seem like was out there at all. Is that a supply or is that a demand issue? Is that the Nuggets keeping him from going to the market, or is that the market saying we don't want Jamal Murray? I think the answer is probably both. And perhaps if there were any thoughts entertained by the Denver Nuggets at this point to maybe shop Jamal Murray, what happened in Boston might scare them away. If they were having conversations, they have to see what happened to Brad Stevens and the way they're getting killed and go, yeah, maybe we shouldn't trade Jamal Murray. But I've looked at the Boston Celtics. I think they've been a more proactive version of the Denver Nuggets in this way. So the Nuggets win the title the year before Boston does, right? So I think that the Nuggets idea, even with the changes in the financial structure of the NBA, the Nuggets, and you could talk about Bruce Brown, he was always going to, cost them too much. But Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, like the Nuggets did have some things happen after they won a title in where they were trying to be a little bit different, losing guys and trying to replace them in different ways. I think the Celtics have been a little bit more aggressive in doing the same thing. I mean, they both won a title about the same time. And it seems like Brad Stevens has been a little bit more pedal to the metal here in trying to be proactive in making these moves, as opposed to Denver that has just allowed a slow bleed of its talent over the last few years. But I look at them as being somewhat intertwined and facing a lot of the same problems. And we have seen Boston move on from Drew Holiday. They moved on from Kristaps Porzingis. Now they're moving on from Jaylen Brown. I mean, these are three fairly significant pieces to their championship team that they have let go. And the Nuggets just got around last offseason to Michael Porter. That would be the one. But what's going on in Boston, you have to ask yourself, is this what the Nuggets should be doing? Or are the Nuggets, is Boston, should they be following the Nuggets model and let's not get rid of these guys willy-nilly. Let's keep as much of our team together as we can year over year and let this roster slowly bleed out. I would kind of think it would be good to be proactive, like Boston kind of has been. But then again, they traded, and my problem with trading Jaylen Brown, nothing that Brad Stevens says I disagree with in terms of the justification for trading Jaylen Brown. But it's so much like the Luka trade where I go, if you want to trade him, okay, we can have our difference in opinion on that. But man, you got to get something more for him than what you got. Nico Harrison got nothing in return for Luka, and the Celtics, until they do something with the first round picks they got for Philadelphia, have gotten nothing in return for Jaylen Brown. And maybe that's why the Nuggets haven't been as aggressive as I wish they would be in trying to reshape this team, because they're looking at what's happening in Boston and saying, well, they're not getting any closer to a championship either, and they're just getting killed by their fan base and the media covering their team because they're getting rid of all these guys. I kind of think that Boston has the right idea. I just don't know if they're executing it well. And I think part of the reason why they're not executing it well is what my bigger issue with all of this is. All of a sudden, this apparatus that you had in place to help the smaller markets retain their talent, right? LeBron goes to Miami, super team era is born. All of these smaller markets scared to death that their best players are going to be poached by, bigger markets or by other stars, right? Because in that time, you either joining up with the Heat or you're trying to create your own team to battle the Heat. So the NBA creates this Supermax, which continues to, obviously, with everything else, costs go up year over year over year. That Supermax becomes more and more expensive. Nikola Jokic is going to make almost $75 million a year if he signs an extension with the Denver Nuggets next summer. I mean, it's going to be a crazy number. But that's what happens, right? We see it in our own lives. Everything costs more. To these players, to these teams, the Supermax costs more and more. But so instead of leaving this in place and saying, you know what, that's okay because we want these smaller markets to be able to keep their stars, or just markets in general, Doesn't have to be big, small. It's just every team, we want them to keep their stars. So the balance of talent throughout the league is better than it was during the super team era. But then they created this second apron thing, which is now making these supermaxes albatrosses around the neck of these teams. And Brad Stevens is having to trade Jaylen Brown for Magic Beans because not only is he too expensive for the Celtics, he's too expensive for everybody else. On why the market wasn't as robust for Jaylen Brown. I refuse to believe we're wrong about how good of a player Jaylen Brown is, but because of the financial constraints that are in place, Jaylen Brown is too expensive. And that continues to be my issue here. You could have done one or the other to create parity. If that was the ultimate goal, to give every team a chance, you either create what is basically a hard cap in the second apron because no one is daring to go into there. And then that way you can't have super teams because even these guys that want to join up with other stars aren't going to take nothing. So you make all these financial restrictions to balance out the talent. Or you don't put those financial restrictions in place and you just keep the supermax, and it means that these teams will be able to offer their stars more money than anybody else. You created something in the supermax and then created another thing that made the supermax a problem. And it's leading to the dumbest basketball trades that you have ever seen in your life. It led to the Luka deal. It's leading to the Jaylen Brown deal. These are dumb trades where the teams that are trading these stars are getting far less than fair market value back. But as Brad Stevens says, can't have two guys making 70% of your cap. And I think the market kind of said, yeah, well, we're not going to sign up for that. But yet the Nuggets kind of were, which is interesting. Again, I can't really make heads or tails about what the Denver Nuggets are doing this offseason. I think I'll have a better idea when Peyton Watson gets resolved. But we went into the offseason thinking all they were going to do was dump contracts, most notably Cam Johnson. Well, they've reportedly turned down multiple offers for Cam Johnson, so clearly they don't want to dump him that badly. Thought that Jamal Murray was a player that they would consider trading. Name has not come up once in any trade rumors. We thought this team was deathly afraid of the second apron. I mean, if they sign Peyton Watson for $8 million or more, if I'm understanding the math Bobby Marks is doing, they're going to be in the second apron. So I don't know what the Denver Nuggets are doing. And meanwhile, they lost Valanciunas and lost Tim Hardaway. But I blame this system more than anything. And I'm critical of the Denver Nuggets, but I blame the system that they work in. I'm hating the game more than the player, if that makes sense. I hate that teams are faced with these decisions. Because the initial idea I liked, let's make something to where it incentivizes the player to stay with the team that drafted them, developed them. And now you have the Celtics saying, we can't have Jaylen Brown on our team. It's wild. I hate it. I hate it. And it's not good for the league. 719-24-7. 13-13. Speaking of a basketball league that makes very questionable decisions, Caitlin Clark. It doesn't seem like the WNBA wants to step in and protect their biggest star. So another entity has offered to step in on their behalf, and it is the worst possible entity to step in. I will explain further next. if you're looking for some sports to watch tonight, no World Cup. Baseball season, I believe, is still going on. But Caitlin Clark returns tonight. Missed the last game because of some injuries that she has been dealing with. But she will play tonight against the LA Sparks. And part of the reason why Caitlin Clark did not play her last game is because Alyssa Thomas kneed her in the groin and put her fist on her throat. Now, maybe both of those things did not contribute to her missing a game, but the last time Caitlin Clark was on the court, that's what was happening. And the WNBA is continuing at everyone's. I mean, doesn't it just baffle you? It baffles me that the league cannot seem to get out of its own way to allow the league to take off and reach new levels of popularity and, dare I say, maybe break out of the super niche spot that it's in this country and be more or be all that it can be, because they just have not handled the star of Caitlin Clark well. They just haven't. And anybody who is fair-minded about the whole thing, does not have an agenda against Caitlin Clark, can see that she is their ticket to a new level of relevancy in our sporting landscape, and they are screwing it up. She is still taking cheap shots. She is still, to me, the most targeted player in the league. No other player. It draws, some of the physicality and the shots that Caitlin Clark takes. And the WNBA, only because of a firestorm, that seems to be the only thing that moves them to do anything, is when they have a firestorm on their hands. But out of the Alyssa Thomas thing came a firestorm. People were like, are you kidding me? She wasn't even thrown. Alyssa Thomas wasn't even thrown out of the game. And Caitlin Clark is taking a fist to the throat, and it just looks terrible. And then you have analysts that are trying to minimize what Alyssa Thomas did and not call it out for what it is. Nobody's asking for Alyssa Thomas to be banned from the WNBA, but how about calling it out? Like when Draymond Green does the stuff that Draymond Green does, everybody points it out and says, this is beyond the pale here. You can't do this crap. But yet when these things happen to Caitlin Clark, it's like, well, you're kind of the narrative and you're overreacting, and it's not. Just call it for what it is. And it's bothering everybody that is hoping that this league succeeds or enjoys watching this league. And I wish that the WNBA would wise up and understand what they have. I'm not talking about now the cheap shots. The players could certainly stop doing that. I don't think that we enjoy watching basketball where there are a ton of cheap shots, so they could go ahead and stop doing that. I've never been one to say that the other players in the league need to bow down to Caitlin Clark and to treat her with kid gloves. They don't even need to be, go above and beyond to give her praise and to show their appreciation for what she has done for the league. But how about a little bit of admiration, right? We see in the NBA, we see people, talk about Jokic and LeBron and Wemby. And how about just a little bit of that? I think that would be enough. You don't have to say, thank goodness she's in the league and I owe everything in my career to Caitlin Clark. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about bending a knee and worshiping her. But how about stop making her a target? Meanwhile, the WNBA, you're the entity that should actually be bowing down. You're the entity that should be hyping up Caitlin Clark and protecting Caitlin Clark. Right? And the protecting is not saying call every single little foul that is on Caitlin Clark or by a player on Caitlin Clark, but it's swift action and a punitive penalty for the players that take shots at Caitlin Clark as a deterrent. Don't see much of that. So 3 years into this grand Caitlin Clark experiment, it doesn't seem like the WNBA has learned any lessons. And that is frustrating. But the one entity that I do not want to interfere into this just interfered. 11 Republican lawmakers in Congress have written a letter to the WNBA demanding that they take accountability for multiple attacks against Caitlin Clark. Now, a lot of what they say is true. It's happening. But once again, did they not just see what happened when Flo Balogun's red card got overturned? Politicians to stay out of it. By the way, how's that bill coming to reshape college sports and save college athletics? How's that going? You got a timeline on that? How about you focus on one sports thing at a time and stop trying to grandstand and earn political points because you're supporting Caitlin Clark? That's what this is. What are you going to do to the WNBA? You're just using this as political theater to say, hey, I'm a lawmaker that is for Caitlin Clark. Cheap political points. I would say most of those 11 lawmakers are probably not viewers of the WNBA, but they see an opportunity here because they're maybe hearing from their constituents and following them on social media and seeing that there's this groundswell again of people that are saying Caitlin Clark's got to be protected, and politicians always finding an opportunity to capitalize on something like this are sending a letter to the WNBA. That's going to fix it. This is surely going to inspire change within the league. Oh, we have Congress sending us a letter demanding that we take accountability. As if the hundreds of thousands or millions of fans of women's basketball flaming the WNBA on social media every single day for this is not powerful enough. Now we have to have Congress. Like, please just stay out of this and stop trying to use Caitlin Clark for your own political gain. Maybe some of the things you're bringing up, valid, but you're not. It's like that meme of LeBron at the line. Everyone can say that except you. I do not want to hear politicians weighing in on these things. I want to hear politicians weighing in on things that they have been hired to fix or hired to weigh in on. You did not, and I did not elect congressmen. I mean that across the country, congressmen and women to weigh in on Caitlin Clark. That's not why they're in office. Figure out what you need to figure out, and we'll just stay in our sports bubble over here and we'll try to figure it out. I don't know that the WNBA is ever going to figure it out, and that's sad. I just know that Congress isn't going to be the thing. A letter from Congress is not going to be the thing to make the WNBA go, oh, Caitlin Clark's really important to us. We've been screaming that at them for the last 3 years. Again, Caitlin back on the court tonight against the LA Sparks. For now, I bid you adieu. Appreciate your patronage and your interaction. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll reconvene tomorrow. How about that at 3 here on Extra Sports 1300 and 740 KVOR.